Good evening and welcome. I'm Elizabeth Youngblood. I am the Executive Director of Stanford Professionals in Real Estate. I want to welcome you to the 7th Annual Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame. And I want to start by welcoming our two most important guests tonight, Dan Neidick and Jim Bowie, our second inductee. Welcome, Jim. So the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame honors the legacy of Stanford alumni, faculty, and student achievements in the field of real estate. There are a select few individuals who qualify to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and we're really pleased to have 7 of our inductees here tonight, including Jim and Dan. So Jim and Dan were chosen because they've had a sustained positive impact on the world of real estate. They're both recognized as icons in the industry. They have made considerable contributions to Stanford itself. They're both committed to enhancing the education and professional development of younger real estate professionals. They're dedicated to innovation, and most importantly, I'd say, they both help to better their own communities, both locally and globally. So we're delighted to welcome them into the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame. I'd appreciate it if the 6 inductees who are here might raise their hands. Dan Neidick and Jim Bowie, of course, tonight. We also have Bill Tooley. Bill, would you raise your hand or stand up? And Fred Allen. Sam Freshman. Bob Burke. And Tad Toby just exited for another, but Tad was here earlier too. So that was outstanding to have 7 here in the room with us. I'd also like to give special recognition. One of Spire's objectives is to encourage current students to learn about real estate placemaking in the built environment. I talked to many alums who talk about the fact that when they were on campus, they had no idea the field of real estate existed. And we aim to change that slowly, student by student. So we've invited a number of students here tonight. I'd ask them to stand. If you're a Stanford student, please stand. Go ahead. Thank you. And if the non-students in the room, I was going to say adults, but the non-students in the room, if you would make a special attempt at some point in the evening to seek out a student, shake their hand, maybe offer to have coffee with them or something, that would go a long way towards promoting Stanford alumni in real estate. They'll be alumni far longer than their students. I also want to take the time to thank Spire's corporate partners. We kicked off a corporate partnership program about a year ago, which has been very important to the growth of our programs and activities. And it started, and it's been a long time, that our founding core partner is Allen Matkins Law Firm. They supported Spire when we were still just a glimmer in Chad Hagel's eyes, I think. I also want to thank our other core sponsor, AEI Consultants. The CEO, Holly Neighbor, is here. Holly, would you stand up? Great. Thank you, AEI Consultants. And then our third core sponsor is the Toby Foundation, Tad Toby. We also are excited to bring on some new tech, real estate, young companies. Rad Urban is in the East Bay. Marcus and Millichap is not so young. Juniper Square and Seifarth and Shaw. So thank you for all that you do to support Spire and our activities. I'd also like to recognize, it feels like an Oscar speech. I want to say thank you to the Spire Board of Directors, if you might stand as well. That's including our chairman, Patrick Tooley. We have a really healthy, active, dedicated board of volunteers, and I'm appreciative. It helps me do my job better. So I'd like to welcome up our current president. He is founded the Stanford Real Estate Council. He was an early big supporter of Spire. He now serves as the president of Spire, and in, I guess, kind of his part-time job, it must be, for as much as he does for us, he also is the managing director of Argosy Real Estate Partners. David Butler, class of '96. Come on, Dave.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good evening to you all. Welcome to the 7th Annual Hall of Fame event. We're very happy to have you here. Once again, this should be a really great event, and we want you to take the time to obviously relax and have a nice dinner, but also, we have some really great video tributes here, which I hope you'll enjoy as well. So I thought I'd just give a quick overview of where Spire is today. I had the opportunity to take over being president of Spire at the beginning of this year. Had very large shoes to fill to follow in Chad's footsteps, to obviously all the vision and energy that he had put into the organization. At the same time, as Elizabeth mentioned, we have a very strong board and staff, and also regional leadership as well. So everything seems to be running on all cylinders, and everyone works very well together. So it's been a really great year for Spire. We are still the only real estate alumni organization in the Stanford network. We have 2,400 members now in 34 states and 22 countries. So we're all over the world now, and also every academic department is represented in our membership. And we also have alums all the way back to the 1940s who are current members, which that's quite a ways back, and all the way up until current students today. We've also made very good progress this year. As you can see on some of these screens, sort of our 3 pillars, which is our long-term goals of the organization. First of all, from an alumni networking standpoint, we've had 20 events this year in 10 different cities across the country with just about 1,000 attendees. Student outreach is another one of our pillars. We provided $26,000 in student grants this past year. And our campus club, which is called Aspire, has 200 members. And also something we're very proud of is our mentor program. We have 35 alums who are mentoring current students. And most importantly, we also support the Golden Shovel competition team, the Stanford team versus Cal every year. We are on a 2-year win streak. So hopefully we can maintain our football streak as well tomorrow over Cal. And lastly, educational program development. We talked about this today in detail at our earlier SRAC event, but that's really our long-term goal of the organization is to endow and form a real estate center, and also a graduate degree program at Stanford in real estate. We submitted a proposal this year as part of the university long-term planning process. Very exciting time. Again, we're just at the early stages of that, but we feel like we're on the right track. So next, I want to take the opportunity to talk about Patrick Tooley, who's our current chairman of Spire since the beginning of the year. As some of you know, Patrick took over to serve as chair after the tragic passing of Luke Cohen, who was our current chair at the time, who took over in January of this year. Patrick was a longtime Spire board member, has contributed in countless ways to our group over the years, and he's really provided a lot of great leadership over the past year, which is really a very critical time after Lou's passing to add a lot of stability. And he really did a great job in so many ways, just improving the way the board worked and kind of process-wise. So not only is his term as chair ending at the end of December, but he's also leaving the board after 7 years. So he's a very long time good friend of mine, and the board's going to miss him greatly. So I'd like to bring actually Patrick up here, say a few words, and I just want to, if you can join me to thank him with a round of applause, that'd be great.
Good evening. I'd like to start first by acknowledging both Jim and Dan. Tonight is your night. You are both you both embody everything that the Hall of Fame is about, and we welcome you to the Hall of Fame and congratulate you on tonight's honor. So thank you. As David mentioned, in January of this year, members of the board asked that I take on the role of interim board chair in response to the untimely and very tragic passing of Lou Cohen. Lou had just recently assumed the role of board chair, and so we were left with quite a void. Lou was a member of the SREC since its very early days, was very active in Spire, and he and his family will continue to be in our thoughts. Despite a very difficult start to the year, Spire thrived in 2017. Dave highlighted for you several of the events and initiatives that Spire undertook during the year. There were many, I assure you, including a very successful SREC event which concluded earlier today. The many Spire events and initiatives don't just happen. They take an extraordinary amount of effort from the staff and from the board. And I personally want to take the opportunity tonight to thank our executive director, Elizabeth Youngblood, with whom I've had the pleasure of working very closely over the last year, as well as her capable team of Anthony Sanchez and Sydney Brooks for all they do to make Spire the success it's become. You deserve to be acknowledged, and we thank you. With respect to the board, we began 2017 with 13 board members. During the year, we held 2 elections, and as of January 1st next year, the board will include 20 members representing different and wide-ranging perspectives from the real estate community. Board members are active, and the board as a unit is efficient and very well functioning. I consider the board to be one of the great assets of Spire, and will continue and believe that it will help to continue expand the ideas and the initiatives of the organization in the years to come. A number of the board members were acknowledged earlier, and I would just add my thanks to all you do on a volunteer basis. With respect to board leadership, I'm very pleased to announce tonight that Wayne Brandt will be assuming the role of chair as I step down at the end of the year. Wayne has been a very active member of the SREC since its inception and was recently elected to the board of directors. For those of you who know Wayne, you will immediately understand why this is such good news. For those of you that don't know Wayne, he's had a very successful career in the real estate business. He currently serves as managing director and national originations director of the Real Estate Capital Markets Group at Wells Fargo Bank. In this capacity, Wayne directs the origination activities of Wells' CMBS and balance sheet lending business. But he's also very active as a volunteer. He's on the board of trustees and currently serves as chairman of the investment committee at Huntington Memorial Hospital in Pasadena. He's on the board of governors of the Mortgage Bankers Association and is on the board of the directors at the UCLA Ziman Center for Real Estate. Although Wayne received his MS from MIT, he assured me that the highlight of his educational career was receiving his undergraduate degree from Stanford. In the many discussions I've had with Wayne over the past 9 months, it's clear he has a strong vision for the future of Spire and where the organization can be taken. It will be a pleasure for me to watch him succeed in the leadership role. Wayne, I'd ask you to stand and be acknowledged quickly. Where are you? There he is. Welcome. And finally, on a personal note, as I transition off the board, I thought it was 5 years, I guess it's been 7. I can't help but reflect on the tremendous success of the organization. It's been remarkable to watch and to participate in the growth and reach of Spire as it has evolved from an idea into what it's become tonight. I'd like to thank Chad, David, Andy, Fred, and all the other board members for giving me the opportunity to participate on the board and to lead the organization this past year. I will take tremendous pride in watching the success of Spire as it continues to grow into the future. Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to now, I'd love to celebrate Jim Bowie and Dan Neidig. I'm going to introduce a longtime partner of Jim's, or actually it was his attorney, Fred Allen of Allen Madkins. He's on the Spire Board of Directors. Many of you in this group know him. He's been longtime friends with Jim, I think going on 30 years. So Fred, I'd like to ask you to come up and talk about your friend and colleague, Jim Bowie. Welcome. Thank you. Can't miss a kiss.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And now, too bad for Jim Bowie. He drew me to be one of his introducers. I just found out a new fact, sitting next to Bill Tooley, that Bill Tooley contributed, and I think Jim knows this, a $25,000 scholarship in the 70s, and it was awarded to Jim Bowie. So I'm sure you are giving Bill Tooley, some, constant dividends from that. So anyway, here we are. Good evening. I'm Fred Allen, the senior partner of Allen Madkins, a California law firm. We are celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. I'm happy and honored to be here for the induction of Jim Bowie of Hines into the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame. We are very happy to welcome a large group of his Hines colleagues who are here tonight, along with a great number of family, friends, and business associates. Since joining Hines, Jim has been responsible for the development, acquisition, and the management of more than 100 million square feet of commercial real estate in 50 cities, representing over $23 billion in value. Highlights of Jim's career with Hines include the development of 101 California in San Francisco, Figueroa at Wilshire in Los Angeles, Embassy House in Beijing, One Museum Place in Shanghai, and Salesforce Tower, an awesome project and a total game changer in San Francisco. Thank you, Jim. A short flashback about Jim's efforts to establish the Hines office in Beijing. I was in the Tokyo Narita airport in the 1990s, trying to buy the one and only Time magazine that was there. I was traveling from a meeting in Shanghai to LA and ran into Jim, and he and I were struggling to see who could buy this Time magazine. Jim was there connecting on a flight from Beijing to San Francisco. Jim rode a lot of airplanes to pioneer the Hines office in Beijing. I was able to visit the Hines projects early in the process, and I was very impressed by their scope and their quality. The rest is history. Hines became a big success in Beijing and Shanghai. A special welcome to Colin Shepard, who's here tonight. Colin is the CEO of Hines Investment Management. Colin and Jim have worked closely together as a team for over 25 years. Jim and his wonderful wife, Mary, have been married for 42 years. They have two children who are here tonight. Courtney, who earned her Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from Penn in 2011, and her Master's from Stanford in 2017. And Andrew, who graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Computer Engineering from Duke in 2017. A couple great kids. I first met Jim, thank you. I first met Jim and the Hines organization in the 1980s when we were representing our great client, Mitsui Fudosan America. Mitsui, a blue-chip worldwide developer, owned a prime piece of real estate in downtown LA, was looking to engage a world-class development manager. Mitsui selected Hines, consisting of Jim Bowie and Colin Shepard and their Great Hines team, to supervise construction, leasing, and management of the building after completion. It was a team made in heaven. The Figueroa Wilshire building was a great success. Many years later, Hines bought the building from Mitsui. The building is still recognized as the best building in Los Angeles. Thank you. Mitsui and Hines have continued their great relationship, and I would like to welcome the Mitsui Fudosan America officers who are here tonight. So again, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome Jim Bowie of Hines into the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame. Jim sincerely credits this award to Hines and his Great Hines team. And without further ado, here's the great video tribute to Jim Bowie. Congratulations. All right.
What 3 words would you use to describe your father?
I think 3 words that I would use to describe Dad are humble, smart, and hardworking. Did I take yours?
Remarkably and deeply thoughtful, polished and poised.
One of the most intuitive people you'll ever meet. Very much a visionary leader.
One of the most intense people you'll ever run into. But at the same time, he's immensely supporting.
A man with a very strong constitution, and he's been unwavering in his focus to ensure that Hines remains the very, very best in the world.
I work for Jim Bowie. We never fail.
From a very early age, he was pretty much the man that he is now.
My father was an Air Force pilot. My mother was a nurse, so we're kind of the quintessential all-American family. We moved probably a dozen times during my growing up years, first 18 years. I'm from every place, which is kind of fun. That creates opportunity as well as challenges. You're constantly saying goodbye to your friends, but you're also having the opportunity to meet new ones. It does give me an ability to connect with other people in a very direct way, because usually I start out my introduction to somebody, where are you from, where'd you grow up, and where'd you go to school? 1 or 2 of those questions, usually there's a connection point.
We were 14 years old. Jim had built a mini bike that was just the loudest, most obnoxious machine that you can imagine. I had a really sweet beagle who chased it when he would go by. That's when we first met, and then 3 years later, we both went to the University of Virginia, and we met up again as freshmen, and dated all through college and got married a year after we graduated. I was in the first graduating class of women at UVA. There were 350 women and 10,000 men. I think that I hit the jackpot and got the very best guy out of all those guys. Before he ever went back to business school, he had identified Hines as where he wanted to be.
I first heard of Hines through an article that I was reading and came across this description of a guy named Jerry Hines doing high-quality, high-rise office buildings in various cities around the country. The article ended with a description of how he is building his organization, and he said, well, we make it simple. We just hire people from Harvard and Stanford Business School. So I looked at that, and I'd been thinking about business school, and I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. Let me apply to Harvard and Stanford and see how it goes.
He got in everywhere except Stanford. And he decided that he really wanted to go to Stanford, so he deferred for a year and applied again. And then when he applied to Stanford, he got on the wait list. I believe it was in August, he heard that he got off the wait list. That was it. He flew out, looked at some apartments, and before we knew it, we were there.
I joined Hines in 1980 as an assistant project manager.
He's pretty much stuck with the idea that he wanted to build beautiful buildings and places for people to work and live that are very special.
Real estate development is a unique career because you have the opportunity to have such a major impact on the cities that you're doing business in. It's a privilege to do that, but it's also a major responsibility. 101 California was my platform for learning the various aspects of real estate. Hines has a philosophy of giving back to the communities that it builds in. Mr. Hines hired Philip Johnson, a world-renowned architect, to come up with a design for this site. He put it on the block in a way that it opened up a plaza connecting California to Market Street, where we basically took half of the site, gave an open space to the city. And cities really appreciate that.
When I first met Jim, he was a rising star, and it was very obvious that Jim was incredibly intelligent.
He sees things quickly. His intuition is impeccable.
His emotional quotient is extraordinarily high. He has a strong sense of people.
Jim is very collaborative. He's really known to, be somebody who can build consensus.
He treats people in a way that they'd like to be treated, and so his deals get done when others would have failed.
It really is about discipleship. It comes from a man, Gerald Hines.
The culture at Hines is one of excellence to the point of perfection.
They're very successful primarily because they really do understand their business from top to bottom. Hines values architecture, they value design.
Jerry Hines, his focus was to hire the best architects to design high-quality buildings that would last, 50, 60, 70 years.
Jem Bowie has been a huge part of creating the culture that we have today.
Jem's always been a very pioneering entrepreneur. The entree into Los Angeles was a first for Hines, and we were extremely proud of Figueroa Wilshire developing that for Mitsui Fudosan.
I was really spreading my wings professionally, and I was able to lead the development effort in Los Angeles with Mitsui Fudosan as our client.
So Figueroa Wilshire, just saying the name brings a smile to my face. I'm biased, but I think Figueroa Wilshire is the most attractive building in Los Angeles. It's in downtown, a 52-story building, octagonal in shape with a crown that lights up at night at the top. It's even the queen on the Hines chess set. I was living in Houston, Texas, and Jim convinced me to come join the team and build this landmark together. This was a project where it was his first real baby as the leading partner on the project. It was such a big part of my life and the formation of my career together with Jim.
I remember while we were very busy here in San Francisco doing a number of important seismic retrofit projects in the mid-90s, Jim would often disappear for a week or more and then reappear and then disappear again. If you asked him, I think he could tally well over 100 trips to China.
I was going to Asia once a month and staying for 7 to 10 days. It's been a major part of my life.
He was seeking to do at that time was to extend the Hines platform to China.
We went to China looking for opportunities in the early 90s because development in the U.S. was slowed.
It turned out to be what we eventually called Embassy House. Embassy House is a beautiful glass tower designed by HOK in Hong Kong, and it looks somewhat commercial, but it's got some beautiful balconies, and it's a really stunning piece of architecture. Inside is a whole world, a whole universe. It's really beyond just being a place to live. It became a real community, and there was nothing like that in China.
The Hines platform in China is really, a testament to Jim's early recognition of the opportunities there, and I think they're benefiting from them.
We only could have succeeded with a type of vision that Jim has, and probably the greatest example of that is One Museum Place. We're almost across the finish line. We have some hard yards ahead of us, but that project is a perfect example of how Jim had faith that this small seed of an idea could actually become something great.
Obviously, Jim is very smart and very principled and has surrounded himself with an incredible team.
I remember one time when I first started working for Jim, and I came to Jim for advice, and I said, Jim, if there's one thing you could tell me to do, what would it be? He said, Tom, it's easy. Hire the right people and get out of the way.
I don't know of any other real estate organization in the world that has people equal to those in Hines.
Hines has a pretty remarkable ability to maintain its valued employees. The greatest Heinz asset is the Heinz employee.
Heinz people work hard, but the relationships among the people in Heinz are very respectful and friendly. It's not a 24/7 operation where people don't have families. Jim is very clear that he wants people to have balanced lives.
Heinz as a family company does attract people who have a commitment not just to quality and integrity, but to this sort of family environment.
I think our happy place as a family is definitely our house in Ross. Our rituals as a family are probably hiking with our dog, Chloe.
Yeah, Dad loves that.
Proud parenting moments come all the time. Mary and I are very fortunate to have two wonderful kids. It's just been remarkable to watch them grow and spread their wings.
I think Dad's work ethic has influenced me. Also, not be afraid of failure. He would always say when we were growing up, I'd rather have you fail and try again or ask for help as opposed to like find a shortcut.
He's not really a preacher of just giving
No,
advice,
he's
so it's
not.
kind of, he's just led by example for our whole lives, which makes it kind of hard to distill down, but is also, I think, kind of why the lessons have been so powerful.
His life is really about family, and it's the family that he has with Mary, and it's the family he has with Heinz.
I think Dad at the dinner table is probably pretty similar to Dad at work. He's a really good listener. Maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, we drove out for a couple hours to the Sacramento office. Dad was, extremely aware of not just what was going on with the Heinz properties, but what was going on with people personally, where they lived in and around Sacramento, and he asked them, personal questions about their family.
I think it's genuine. It's not something that you could do artificially.
I think the reason that he knows people, remembers their names, knows who they are, is because he's very interested. He asks a lot of questions.
Jim is one of those extraordinary leaders in our industry. The Salesforce Tower is a perfectly fitting jewel, if you will, in Jim's crown.
We're very, very proud of the Salesforce Tower and Salesforce Transit Center. With Jim's help, with Heinz's help, we have absolutely delivered on every promise that we made. The vision that was originally there is the vision that's being delivered and built today.
My daughter, who now lives in San Francisco, says you literally cannot escape the looming presence of Salesforce Tower. It's become really this incredible physical expression of really San Francisco's predominant position in the West Coast.
If we're going to make a difference, if we're going to be able to succeed in business, if we're going to bring the Heinz standard forward, then it's really a matter of transparency, honesty, and holding ourselves to a high standard.
A lot of people in business cut corners and take shortcuts. Well, I think it's critical for real estate developers to recognize the responsibilities that come with the privilege of building buildings in the built environment. The thing I try to do is do the right thing, do what I would want done if I were in a position of authority. We've always tried to do the best quality projects, and I think if you look at the portfolio of work over the years, it stands up to that test quite well.
What a terrific video tribute to Jim. Elizabeth, thanks to you and your staff, and all the video participants for memorializing such wonderful testimonials. Good evening, I'm Hans Lee, and on behalf of Stanford Professionals in Real Estate, I'd like to thank all of the Hall of Fame sponsors for supporting this very special event not only for Spire, but for this year's Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame inductees, Dan Neidig and Jim Bowie. In addition to my involvement in Spire, I'm proud to represent several organizations here this evening, but tonight, it is truly my honor to speak to you as a proud alumnus of the Hines West region, which along with Hines Asia Pacific region, Jim Bowie is Chief Executive Officer of. I had the privilege of being part of the Hines West region and the Hines family, if you will, for 12 years under Jim's leadership. Jim hired me out of business school in 1999 to join the West region as an assistant project manager. I distinctly remember Jim calling me during my second semester of business school to congratulate me on the offer, which I had accepted. Now, my professional experience prior to business school was that of a junior military officer. So when Jim called, to me it was like the brigade commander hailing me on the hotline. I think I might have even been standing at attention in my kitchen while on the phone. With a sense of duty, I immediately asked Jim, what should I do to prepare myself to hit the ground running upon my arrival? Without hesitation, Jim replied, I shouldn't worry about that now. Instead, he encouraged me to get the most out of my last semester of business school before graduating, asked me how my fiancée, now wife of 18 years, was doing in medical school, and wanted to make sure I was in good shape to relocate from the East Coast to Northern California. Jim, you may not recall the conversation because, as Courtney said in the video, it's simply your nature to care about people, even people you had just met or barely knew. So when I arrived at Hines in San Francisco, I was astonished at the incredible talent Jim had assembled within the West region at Hines. Now recall, the second half of the 90s was the arrival of the information age, or the so-called internet boom. The vast majority of my business school classmates were joining technology companies. Real estate, arguably the oldest profession in the history of mankind, was one of the least popular professions to go into in the late 90s, especially when compared to starting a career in the glamorous, then new internet business and all the potential it promised. Yet somehow, Jim had been able to attract into Hines the very brightest, most talented people, not only within real estate, but from all business backgrounds. Today, and here in the birthplace of Silicon Valley and technology, we are so keenly aware of the importance of identifying, recruiting, and recruiting top talent for the success of an organization. Jim recognized the importance of this decades ago, and looking back now, it's very clear to me that one of the very special attributes of Jim, with the Hines organization behind him, is his ability to recognize and attract talent. Now, as a project manager at Hines, you really cut your teeth in all aspects of real estate development. You learn from the best, because Jim had surrounded you with the best, and that wasn't just limited to Hines employees. It included architects, consultants, brokers, attorneys, contractors, and financial partners. Many of you who are in the room here this evening, and all of whom recognize the same thing I did. And that is, it's a privilege to work with Hines, and correspondingly with each other, because of the quality of the people at Hines and the Hines team supporting the broader project or deal team. As an individual under Jim's tutelage and within the Hines system, you're directly involved in every aspect of real estate. Many organizations streamline the value chain by establishing separate departments for acquisitions, financing, development, asset management, and so on. But not Hines, not Jim. Jim wanted his project managers to be well-rounded to the betterment and the benefit of the individual, as opposed to the near-term expediency and efficiency of a project or deal. After you've done your time as a project manager, when you're ready to take the next step in your career development, Jim's door was open. In fact, he wouldn't wait for you to come knocking. He'd ask you to make an appointment for his infamous annual look back and look ahead meetings. And there were two fundamental tenets to this meeting. Number one, Jim would remind you that the Heinz platform was one of a platform of entrepreneurship. And number two, you write your own job description. Literally, Jim handed you a blank sheet of paper and encouraged you to write your own job description. These two tenets are incredibly empowering. I believe they're major reasons for Heinz's success in the West and the Asia-Pacific regions. Simply put, what Jim encouraged his team members to do was to find their own way to success and rely on one's own attributes of vision, courage, judgment, and leadership with all the resources that Heinz has to offer and make exceptional deals and build remarkable projects. His business partner, Tom Krugel, recounted Jim's philosophy in the video: hire the right people and get out of the way. In what can be described as the complete opposite of a micromanager, Jim would not only never tell his people how to do something, he wouldn't even tell you what to do. In fact, I recall Jim saying to me on one occasion, "I have too much respect for our people to tell them they have to do something." Jim was confident with just the right amount of guidance, the people he hired could figure the rest out on their own. And that philosophy is a major reason that Heinz, under Jim's leadership, has succeeded in expanding the West region's footprint into the Pacific Northwest, San Diego, Orange County, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, Australia, and of course China, as well as into almost every product type, including residential, industrial, civic complexes, sports facilities. Jim's accomplishments, manifested in the numerous skyscrapers up and down the West Coast, and indeed across the ocean in Asia, have been well documented. If you refer to the selection criteria for induction into the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame, two of them I'd like to call out have less to do with the built environment and more to do with people. Number one, a commitment to enhancing the education and professional development of younger individuals involved in real estate. And number two, sustained positive impact upon the broadly defined world of real estate over multiple generations of professionals. With this in mind, Jim's contribution to the real estate business goes well beyond buildings and projects. I believe Jim's lasting legacy are the people who've worked for and with him. Heinz's leadership across the organization is littered with people who worked under Jim. Outside of Heinz, former partners and project managers have gone on to become leaders at the top levels of other highly regarded firms within the industry. So in this regard, Jim's contribution to the real estate industry is far and wide-reaching. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Jim Bowie to start working his way up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Stanford professionals in real estate, current and former Heinz teammates, and all of Jim's colleagues here tonight and throughout the industry, it is my distinct honor to introduce Jim Bowie and congratulate him into his induction into the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Fred and Hans, for those generous remarks. I'm not sure they're deserved, but they're much appreciated nonetheless. I'd like to give a very special thank you to Elizabeth and Sydney for organizing such a fabulous event this evening. Couldn't be any better, so job well done. Thank you very much. First, I'd like to express my appreciation to the Spire Board of Directors. It is a great honor to be nominated to the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame, and I'm pleased to accept this award on behalf of the Heinz West and Asia Pacific region. I'd like to offer my congratulations to Dan and his family as well. Anyone who has worked in our industry for the past 4 decades knows well the Dan Neidig-led Goldman Sachs team and the remarkable accomplishments they've achieved. And now Dune Real Estate Partners. and just how well earned this Hall of Fame recognition truly is. Congratulations, Dan. I'd also like to recognize and thank several of my classmates from the GSB class of 1980 for being here this evening. Kurt and Judy Wozniak, Doug and Melinda Kayward, Hamid and Tina Mogadam, Bill and Laura Rothaker, and Matt and Carolyn Corey. Matt, congratulations on winning the 2017 NAOP Developer of the Year Award. It's a big deal and well earned. Congratulations. It's hard to believe it's been almost 40 years since we first arrived at Stanford. We all looked a bit younger back then, but I especially remember Hamid looking about 16 years old, arriving in Palo Alto with his 2 degrees from MIT and a head full of curly black hair. One of the smartest things I ever did at Stanford was to join Hamid's study group. Even back then, it was clear that Hamid was headed to the very top of whatever he chose to do. When I received the call in February from my good friends Fred Allen and David Knowles, informing me that the Spire Board's nomination, my initial reaction was that it must be a mistake. What have I done to deserve this honor? I asked myself. And besides, I'm much too young to be receiving a career recognition award. That evening, when I shared this thought with my beautiful wife, Mary, she gently said to me, "Don't worry, sweetheart, you're not too young." I guess the youth is in the eye of the beholder. I did, however, tell Fred and David that I felt the individual nature of this recognition was a bit out of keeping with the team-oriented approach practiced at Heinz. Well then, do what I did and accept the nomination on behalf of your team, Fred said, which felt more comfortable to me and is what I agreed to do. The team at Heinz begins with the Heinz family and our founder, Jerry Heinz. Mr. Heinz realized decades ago that while he was passionate about developing architecturally significant buildings, what he really wanted to build was an organization through which he could realize his vision of creating exceptional places for people to work, live, and play in cities around the globe. In order to do that, he needed to create capable people who not only had a vision that he shared, but also who had the personal stake in the game. Thus began the evolution of Heinz into what it has become today, a truly global, privately held, multi-product type investment and development organization that serves as a platform for real estate entrepreneurs. The basic structure of the Heinz organization is built around an alignment of interests, where the Heinz family and the senior Heinz employee partners share 50-50 in the economic opportunities that come with the projects that we undertake together, as well as the results of the operating business, both up and down. This alignment has proven to be remarkably effective and has created a powerful organizational structure that is reflected in the long tenure common at Heinz. Jerry's son, Jeff, has done a fantastic job of building upon the development company that his dad founded. As president of Heinz since 1990, Jeff has led the significant expansion of the company into a broad array of products, services, and domestic and foreign geographies. Jeff currently oversees a portfolio of assets in excess of $100 billion, located in more than 200 cities in 21 countries around the globe, and with an organization of more than 4,000 exceptional real estate professionals. From my perspective, tonight's recognition has been earned by the more than 1,000 people who make up the West and Asia Pacific regions for Hines. Tom Krugel articulated exactly right in the video my management philosophy: hire the right people and get out of the way. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the regional senior partners who were able to join us this evening. Please briefly stand when I call out your name. Colin Shepard, with Hines for 36 years, currently CEO of the Hines Investment Management Group, and before that, my partner in Southern California and the Pacific Northwest for 25 years. Thank you, Colin. Norm Spencer. Norm oversaw the marketing and leasing activities throughout the West region for 30 years before taking a temporary sabbatical 5 years ago to improve his golf game. Norm, when are you coming back to work? I think that's a no. Tom Krugel. 33 years with Hines, responsible for operations and engineering throughout the region, oversees 800 Hines colleagues and a portfolio totaling 50 million square feet. Thank you, Tom. John Carr, Chief Financial Officer, 21 years with Hines, responsible for the financial oversight of assets totaling $40 billion throughout both regions. Thank you. Jim Morrison, China Country Head, 30 years with Hines, responsible for developing some of the greatest truly landmark projects in China, most recently the 60-story One Museum Place Tower in Shanghai. Thank you, Jim. Ty Binion, 19 years with Hines, oversees all development and investment activities in the Pacific Northwest. Dusty Harris, with Hines for 12 years, heads up all investment and development activities in Salt Lake City. George Clever, Stanford class of 87, GSB class of 94, 23 years with Hines, oversees an extensive portfolio of investment and development projects located throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. Thank you, George. Cam Faulkner, GSB class of 97, with Hines for 20 years, developing several projects including 2 major new mixed-use projects and residential towers in San Francisco's Trans-Bay District. Thank you, Cam. Doug Metzler, 15 years with Hines, oversees all development and investment activities throughout Greater Los Angeles and Las Vegas, including the major new mixed-use project in West LA. Ray Lawler, with Hines for 10 years, responsible for Hines' activities in Orange County, including more than 25 investment and development projects accomplished over the past couple of years. Thank you, Ray. David Eaton, 10 years with Hines, oversees marketing and leasing activities for Hines in the San Francisco Bay Area. Thank you, Dave. Gary Holzer, Hines Investment Management, fund manager for several important Hines capital partners, also the Global Sustainability Officer for Hines. Thank you, Gary. And finally, though certainly not least, Claire Cormier-Tilke. Hi, Claire. I have the microphone. Claire is Chief Operating Officer, Heinz Investment Management. She holds 2 degrees from Stanford, a BS and an MS, both the class of '08. She graduated in 2.5 years at the top of her class, while serving as captain of the track team and as a U.S. Olympic team finalist. Many thanks to each of you for your exceptional contributions that you and your teams have made to Heinz over the years. Being your partner is indeed a great privilege. In addition to the currently serving leadership, Hans Lee has rallied quite a distinguished group of Heinz West alumni who have joined us here tonight. I was checking their business cards earlier this evening, and most of them read President, CEO, or Owner, which made me feel pretty good about what they learned when they were at Heinz. Out of respect for time, I won't introduce each of them by name, but please stand and be recognized as a group if you are a Heinz West alum. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you, Hans, for your encouragement and support in bringing this group together. And now I'd like to offer a special thanks to Bill Tooley and to Lyle and Rosalind Payne, all 3 of whom I believe are here this evening. Both the Tooleys and the Paynes established fellowships at the GSB, specifically targeting students who, like myself, had expressed an interest in a career in real estate. During my 2 years at the GSB, I was fortunate enough to be the recipient of not one, but of both these fellowships. After graduation, I met with the Tooleys and the Paynes and asked them how I might repay their generosity. "You can't repay it," they both said, "but you can pay it forward." So that is what Mary and I have done, and we encourage all of you who have benefited from your time here at Stanford to be generous in your support when you have the opportunity to do so. It makes a big difference. My final thanks is for my family, who has been enormously patient and supportive of my career at Heinz over the years. You guys are the very best, and I love you very much. Thank you.
Congratulations, Jim and Mary and Courtney and Andrew. I appreciate it. We want you guys to enjoy one another for a few more minutes, and then we're anxious to jump in and recognize Dan Neidig. Thank you very much. So I want to kick it off. We've got a special guest who's reprising his role from our banquet in New York. A few weeks ago, we honored Dan Neidig in New York, and the Neidig family and their friends rolled out the red carpet on behalf of Stanford Professionals in Real Estate, as did the co-chairs for the evening, David Hamamoto, Kia Buckley-Markowitz, and Ralph Rosenberg. Ralph Rosenberg is here tonight to reprise his role. Ralph has been a long-time member of the Stanford Real Estate Council. You call him up, he will do anything for Stanford, he'll do anything for Spire, so I remain appreciative of Ralph. He is the head of real estate for KKR in New York, and he's one heck of a great guy. So I am thrilled to welcome Ralph back up to reprise his role from New York. Ralph Rosenberg.
Wow, that was pretty nice. I'm here to introduce Dan to the Hall of Fame, and I really represent literally dozens of people who have just been lucky enough to have Dan be a part of their life, both professionally and personally. And let me tell you a number of stories that sort of reflect that sentiment. So when I finished college, I started work at Goldman Sachs. And literally on my first day of work, I was assigned to a project that Dan was responsible for as the partner in charge of the business. I ended up pulling an all-nighter and sleeping on his couch. And while I had never met Dan until the following morning, I was really mesmerized by his intensity, his intellectual curiosity, his tenacity, his drive, and his passion for really understanding how to dissect problems and to come up with the right answer to the real estate problem at hand. And from that day on, I really had an incredible journey really with Dan throughout the following 18 years that zigged and zagged its way through a number of unbelievable transactions and experiences. Within a couple of days of joining Goldman Sachs, Dan and I crossed paths in Central Park running at 6 in the morning. And when Dan recognized that I was running in the park, in the office, he said to me, "Why don't we start running together?" And this was when I was literally young, out of college, and had no experience in the business, and he had no data points really upon which to judge me as a professional or as a person, but he liked the fact that I was disciplined enough to get up and run at the same hour as he. And so literally, I think for about a dozen years, almost 7 days a week, Dan and I ran together in Central Park, the 6-mile loop, not only during the week, but on the weekends. And to my wife's chagrin, oftentimes when we would come home from dinner on a Friday or Saturday night, there'd be a message on the answer machine in very short words saying, "Ralph, it's Dan, 6 a.m. And what was amazing about those experiences in hindsight was that I really had an opportunity for almost an hour a morning to really pick Dan's brain to understand how he thought about the real estate industry and how we could work on projects together. And those mornings really were incredibly special to me and really transformative in terms of my development as a professional. At a really young age, Dan started giving me incredible responsibility and let me run day-to-day our acquisition of Cadillac Fairview and us taking that company through a bankruptcy process, and also our investment initially in Rockefeller Center properties and ultimately the acquisition of Rockefeller properties, and he embraced me as his intellectual partner and allowed me to sit on the board of Rockefeller Center with him. I didn't realize at the time what an extraordinary leader Dan was by example. And I say that in the following respect. I don't think Dan had any playbook on how to lead or manage. I think he did it from the heart. I think he did it based on intellectual honesty and rewarding a meritocracy and promoting people with fairness and with really the foresight of understanding who he felt could help him lead the business on a global basis. And I was lucky enough to be in that small group. Again, reflecting on history is part of, I guess, getting older in our industry, but I didn't really appreciate it until many years later that Dan really broke a lot of china for me, rewarding me for my accomplishments by making me a very young partner at Goldman Sachs. I sort of leapfrogged a number of people in our group at the time, and while I thought it was just sort of okay and natural, I'm sure that Dan really did a lot of soul searching on that decision and really embraced that change and that aggressive move to really send a message to our organization and to our peers in the group. And for that, I'll forever be grateful. I will say that there are several stories about Dan, but I know the evening is got to end at some time, so I won't hit you with too many. But I will tell you that there was never a moment at any stage of my professional development where I spent time with Dan that wasn't really awesome time. We solved problems together. We dealt with adversity together. We laughed together. We commiserated together at Nobu and at Bubby's for pie. We zigged and zagged our way through incredible journeys professionally. One of my favorite moments was when Dan sensed that I felt I was undercompensated one year when I was a young associate. And when we met in the park the following Monday morning, there was a athlete on a bicycle standing next to Dan, and he introduced him to me as our trainer for the next year, who would take us 3 days a week and train us with interval training as his way of rewarding me and our partnership in a way that was quite extraordinary, and for which I will always be grateful. I will say that on a personal level, there's never been anybody who's been more loyal, more there for me and my family, other than literally my own parents, than Dan and Brooke. From picking pediatricians to helping us find doctors in the middle of the night when children were sick, to coaching us through the acquisition of a house next door to them in the Hamptons, where I was definitely reaching outside of my means at the time to own a summer home. Dan encouraged me, nurtured me, and supported me, and gave me the confidence to do those types of things. There's never been a day where Kim or I or any of my 4 children has gone by where Dan and Brooke haven't been there for all of us. Our houses, as I mentioned, are across the street from each other. Our children, would run in their house on a moment's notice and raid the refrigerator, and Brooke would encourage that behavior. And it's been an extraordinary run with our relationship, our friendship, and our partnership. So I will pause by saying that Dan is just an awesome guy. He's an incredible professional mentor and role model, a loyal friend, a great father, a great husband, and I really salute you and cherish our relationship. So with that, I think we're going to roll the video for Dan.
When I walk around Rockefeller Center, I'm amazed that private people could have created it. What an amazing accomplishment, and in some ways a gift to the city that it's still there. That speaks to private development, it speaks to philanthropy, it speaks to preservation. We're all lucky to have it.
Once you know him, extremely friendly, extremely engaging.
He kind of cuts through, I don't know how to say it, I would say he's kind of got a stony exterior.
He does have a sense of humor.
He's actually really funny. He's really goofy.
He's a terrible dancer.
He's that rare combination of a trustworthy person, bright, articulate. He probably would hate me saying that right now.
You want the truth? You want to hear it straight? Talk to Dan.
Dan is one of those scary, smart guys who, as you're saying something, he not only gets it, but either improves your idea or questions your thesis before you finish the sentence.
Real estate's complicated. You have to be willing to zig and zag. Dan was brought up by a dad who was in the real estate business. If nothing else, he got it by osmosis.
I remember we were on a vacation or driving somewhere, and we'd veer off and go look at properties. They would always tell us to do whatever we were passionate about or whatever made us happy. But once I went to business school, I knew that I'd want to try to be in real estate. Citibank offered me a job in real estate banking, and I accepted it. I had interviewed at Goldman when I was at Stanford and interviewed with Goldman again after Citibank. And then I went and worked for my father for 2 years. Then a friend of mine said, come and speak to us at Goldman Sachs again. And this time, during the interview, they made me an offer, I don't know, maybe an hour later or 5 minutes later, I accepted.
Dan was a brilliant guy. He had real intellectual horsepower.
He's a person who sees the globe rather than looking at the globe and thinking the world is flat.
Dan is very well suited for real estate because of his ability to create and nurture relationships. I don't really know what his IQ is, but I'm going to bet it's very high. As importantly in this business is having a high EQ.
Daniel was always able to identify value and work through the necessary ingredients to allow the firm to have a significant role in the real estate markets across the globe, actually.
I had, in my mind, 2 very successful careers within Goldman. One, building a real estate investment banking business. I moved over into Whitehall.
I had actually returned from business school right before we set up the Whitehall funds. In my opinion, Dan's greatest accomplishments were associated with things that we did in the 1990 to 2004 era. Under his leadership, we created a lot of, at the time, what were considered to be, the most innovative and largest and most complicated transactions in the real estate space. We bought Westin hotels. We established a formidable, if not the most prolific, non-performing loan platform in the world. And we really pioneered under Dan's leadership what is now a household term, which is the real estate private equity business.
Whitehall funds were a tremendous part of Goldman's success in the late 80s, early 90s.
I had to write the numbers down because I couldn't remember if it was 6 million, 6 billion. I mean, it was so over the top.
Dan was clearly the leader, the creator, the visionary.
In a short time, it became the largest privately held real estate opportunity fund in the world.
And we did some pretty terrific transactions. I think we're actually sitting in one of those places right now, Rockefeller Center.
Dan was instrumental in making that deal from Goldman's point of view.
The Rock Center deal was sort of an extraordinary deal, and with lots of complexity and lots of issues and lots of challenges. And then at the end, it worked out really well.
What I liked about Dan was that he was very straightforward. He was very clear in what he wanted to accomplish. Dan's creativity, combined with his intelligence, is what makes him one of the greats in the industry.
And I think that my dad has a really strong character. I don't think it was about the money so much as it was more about winning and losing. Anybody who's golfed with him specifically knows that he's incredibly competitive with himself.
Dan could buy houses with the golf lessons he's had. He's playing well, he's very fun to be around. If he's not playing well, he's not so fun to be around.
He's just that A student. He's going to get that A.
He definitely seems to intimidate people on first meeting. He had a very famous handshake move, which is he would sort of shake your hand and walk away from you at the same time.
He comes across a little intense, and sometimes people misunderstand him. I think he's actually a lot of fun, and particularly he's got Brooke, because Brooke is somebody who really softens Dan and really is fun. I think Brooke is one of the keys to Dan's success.
Sometimes you get lucky in life. We've been married for 36 years now.
We met on a blind date. It wasn't a date I wanted to go on. I opened the door and thought, I should have washed my hair. I just thought he was cute. It was chemistry.
She challenges Dan. She expands Dan's horizons.
They really balance each other out. They're kind of the perfect couple.
At Goldman Sachs, they used to call her the talent. People loved being with her.
Because of the way he worked, we were on the telephone much more than we were together. And Daniel said, we're just going to get through this. And he always said we. Everything was we. I don't even think I thought about it until later in a conversation, then I thought,
Keeping up with her has been a terrific experience. She has great passion for her causes. She's been as instrumental as anyone in building the Whitney Museum downtown and created the Child Mind Institute. I used to say that before I met Brooke, I had uncashed paychecks on my kitchen table and I felt really rich. We don't have uncashed paychecks anymore.
Brooke is on the board of Lincoln Center Theater, my theater. And I can't tell you how many audiences I sit in. It's always like, oh, the husband doesn't really want to go to the play, but the husband, I mean, I know this is cliche thinking, but I'm afraid it still goes on. Dan loves the theater. He loves going to see plays. He takes theater very seriously. And they go all the time, Brooke and Dan.
Long after the business career fades in people's minds, the things that these two have done to help other people will live and reverberate in the future.
He seems to be one of these guys who's able to balance all the other things. He's devoted to his family, to his kids.
The kids I've known since they were babies. I remember when he and Brooke first bought the East Hampton house, and we were at a conference in Connecticut, and he invited me to fly back to see it. And baby Mallory, she must have been 2, ran into his arms, and I never expected Dan to goo-goo gaga. Beneath that consummate professional exterior was a mushy guy who loved his family.
The children just adore him, and I think they all get him and they all respect him, and they're so different. Stephen was a visual arts major. I mean, he just loves Dan. Mallory's super thoughtful.
I think that for a lot of people, he's this really serious and intimidating character, but for us, it was never like that. He's really loosened up over the last 15 years. You normally want to get like a tequila in him, but then he's incredibly funny and he's got this dry, deadpan humor.
It comes in this very quiet, witty way. Sometimes it takes people a couple beats to understand, particularly me, the joke that he made.
For us, our dad is a lot of times like the funniest guy in the room.
We have great homes and a great family, and that's just because of our marriage and really Brooke.
I feel really lucky, and as we grow older, I feel even more lucky.
When he retired from Goldman, people would ask me, what's your dad going to do now? And I would tell him he's just going to sit on the couch and eat potato chips, which was like the biggest joke of all time.
I thought that to have my own business would be something I'd want to try.
I've been doing it for 10 years. I actually met Dan through a headhunter. The headhunter called and asked me about another position. I wasn't interested in another position at all, and in some ways, almost as an afterthought, I said, "Would you ever want to have lunch with Dan Neidick?" And I said, "Now that I'll do." A lot of people I respect thought that Dan was one of the smartest investors in real estate, but I also heard he was a good guy.
So we met, and I don't know if she saw it the same way I did, but I thought it was pretty obvious that she should come work with us.
Hearing Dan articulate things about our business and the investment environment was really eye-opening for me. I thought, okay, I think this is going to work.
It's a business that as long as we think we can make decent returns, we're allowed to pretty much buy anything we want. We've done a number of transactions. The Standard Hotel, we built on the High Line before the High Line was the High Line.
Dan had the vision to back Andre Ballage's vision, and they built this thing technically in the middle of nowhere. It was a little build it and they will come, and they came.
Probably the 56 Leonard condominium is as interesting and as challenging and as rewarding as anything I've done.
From an architectural perspective, it's quite extraordinary.
This was a transaction that we started before the financial crisis. We owned it through the financial crisis, and then we built it after the financial crisis.
There are not many good stories that came out of development deals that were committed to prior to the crisis.
Sometimes I call it a 7-year overnight success.
In a lot of ways, Dune is a boutique, and people often tell us that we walk with a much bigger footprint than that boutique suggests because of who we are as individuals.
You're trying to find people that other people want to do business with. I think we look for people who can interact with people and will relate to people.
He's an incredible relationship person. He has, I think, a passion for creativity and vision.
Yes, it's about making money, but we represent pension funds, endowments, foundations. The most important thing for us is that we help them be successful.
When you know someone for 35 years, you have lots of stories, but the thing I would just say, it's been my honor to be his friend.
Honesty and integrity are really essential to success. I am proud of what he's done. I'm really proud of what he's done, but I'm more proud of who he is.
Hi. I'm Steven. I'm the middle of Dan's 3 children. I have to say there's something amazing about watching that video and see everyone's take on my dad. People who I grew up respecting, looking up to, and loving, seeing and hearing firsthand of their love and admiration. It's really incredible. I'm lucky to be his son for more reasons than I can express, and I've learned more from him than I can say in this speech. There's no question that he's smart. There's no question that he's good at what he does. We wouldn't be here if he weren't. There are some things you may or may not know about my dad. He is fun, as the video says. He enjoys life, he loves golf, and he loves ice cream. But depending on the day, those could be the worst things that you've ever spoken to him about. He loves his family, his 3 kids, my mother, and his 2 grandsons. He's an incredible husband, and he's smart enough to know to listen to his wife. They have a love and happiness that I aspire to have with my family every day. There's a level of compassion that I think most people don't get to see from my father. He cares. It doesn't matter about what. He cares about you. He cares about what you're doing. He cares about what you're saying, even if he walks out of the room while you're saying it. If anyone ever thought that Dan Neidig was only a tough, hard-to-break guy, then just look at him holding his grandsons. It's not so tough after that smile. Growing up for me, my dad was a numbers guy. He was a mathematical genius whom, as badly as I wanted to be like him, he could do things I could never understand. I always remember when I was in 7th grade, we would do algebra together, and he would look at the equation, and he got the answer. He didn't understand why we had to explain to the teachers how we got the answer, but that's who he was. He was just someone who got it. And when I was younger, that's who he was, someone who got it. But he's not that simple, and as I got older, I got to see what I believe were and are still some of his great qualities. I used to sit in his den when he was on business calls, and I had no idea what was happening on the other end of the line, but I would just listen to him talk. He was concise, he was always composed, and rarely, if ever, made a statement. Instead of that, reaching or beating around the bush, it was simple. He would say, "The question is." I heard that a lot. The question is. You also heard, "Are you being intellectually honest? If A and B happen, then what about C?" I understood these questions a little better the first time that I got grounded and I actually had to answer these questions. But it was also in these questions that I realized there was a sense of humility. I'm not in real estate. I did recently buy a building in Los Angeles. It was a small building in an up-and-coming area for an art studio, and I got to have my dad's advice on the deal. It was a no-brainer to use him as a sounding board and call him, especially when things got tough. And that's when I really got to see something special. In the year or so it took me to make this deal happen, that's when I got to watch my dad truly work. It was incredible. It wasn't just how much he knew, but how good he was at asking the right question. But what really struck me was that he wasn't asking the right question just to get the answer. He wasn't asking to push someone to a direction he wanted them to go without being too aggressive. It wasn't the Socratic method that I always was convinced it was. Sometimes he would ask the question because he just didn't know. Know what you don't know and don't pretend otherwise. Another great lesson that I learned from him. He was never afraid to bring someone in who knew more. There was no ego, there was no false pride, but there was always a vision. An ability to see angles when everyone else thought the deal was done, a way to see an opening when things were falling apart, and a way to make the best out of a tough decision. At that moment, after that deal, so much made sense to me. Humility, honesty, compassion, vision, empathy, understanding, curiosity. And while I'm sure there are more adjectives we could use, these are just some of the traits that helped him in business and also made him an incredible father, husband, and grandfather. My family and his friends and loved ones are truly lucky to have someone who can look at any problem, big or small, see all the angles, and help you find the correct, intellectually honest answer and solution. I'm honored to be able to stand up here and give this speech and could have not asked for a more incredible father, teacher, mentor, and friend. I love you, Dad. Congratulations.
Thank you. I guess one of the reasons you have an evening like this is to hear your son talk to you like that. And I do want to thank Spire for giving me the chance to have this evening. It's interesting to share this evening with Jim Bowie, who may or may not remember that when I was at Goldman Sachs, one of the first deals I ever worked on was 101 California. Actually, if you remember in that video, Brooke talked about the first time we went out, and what she didn't tell you is that we'd been set up on this blind date, and I had called her, and I said, well, I have to go away for a couple of days because I was going to go down to Houston to meet with the Heinz organization on Transco Tower. And actually then what happened was I ended up staying for 2 weeks working on that deal, and when I got back, obviously she thought that too much time had passed. So I think that was part of why she didn't wash her hair. But so I've had a long connection with the Heinz organization, and they certainly don't need me to say it, but it is one of the great organizations, and the job that Jim has done for Heinz is really extraordinary. I also want to thank Elizabeth Youngblood and Sydney Brooks for their work helping to make this evening happen. Ralph Rosenberg, who helped organize the New York event and was nice enough to come out here and make the introduction again tonight. Most of what Ralph said was true. A lot of people worked on this video that you just watched, and I'd like to make a couple of observations about that video. And I'm not that sure about some of these statements that were made about me. It seems to say that I may be funny, although it doesn't seem that there is tremendous conviction there. You heard that both from the video and Ralph and Stephen that I may be smart, but again, that seems to be said sometimes to excuse certain other deficiencies in my personality. And watching the video, I couldn't help but wish that people were as effusive in speaking about me as they were in speaking about Brooke.
Having said that, it's nice to hear my son John say that I can be the funniest person in the room, even if I need some tequila. However, what the video really shows is a career and a life that I'm proud and grateful for. And as Jerry Spire mentioned, I grew up in a real estate family, and once I decided to pursue a business career, I knew that I wanted to be in real estate. I enjoyed the real estate developers and entrepreneurs that I had met growing up and thought the industry would provide a chance to one day pursue my own entrepreneurial ambitions. And I was fortunate both personally and professionally to have the chance to work for my father for 2 years. I'm not sure he really knew what Goldman Sachs was when I went there. I think some of his friends thought it was a furniture store, and some of them thought it was Sonnenblick Goldman. But anyway, I ended up at Goldman Sachs, and I spent 25 years there. And it was unbelievably challenging and rewarding. I met and learned from an incredible group of people. In turn, I think I was able to make a difference in the careers of many of the people who worked for me, and I found that rewarding. And I think both of these statements are clear from the video. And then starting Dune Real Estate Partners allowed me to create a company of my own, and again, it's been challenging and rewarding, and again, I've been able and fortunate to work with an incredible group of people. And I watched some of the other videos that Sydney and Elizabeth provided to me, and I just thought I'd make a couple of comments to some of the younger Spire members here, thoughts about a career. And people often ask me, what allowed me to be successful? And I'd say, firstly, I found a place where my skills matched well with what was required. I think it's important to be honest with yourself about what you're good at, and then find a place where those skills are important to success. As Stephen said, I was always good at knowing what I knew and what I didn't know. I was able to understand what I did well and where I wasn't as strong. And when I moved to positions of leadership, I understood that for people to want to work with me, they needed to trust me, and they needed to understand and believe that I could help them achieve their career success. And finally, it's important to understand who you are, what allows you to be successful, what your talents are. And we're all going to see people who are successful for lots of different reasons. And you'll see people who don't work as hard and yet can still be successful. I think it's just important that we all understand what works for us. We all have our own strengths and weaknesses, and ultimately our strengths will be responsible for success, assuming the weaknesses don't get in the way. While business success has been rewarding, it's also allowed Brooke and me to give back, sometimes more than I would like. I have sometimes, this is a little bit as an aside, I've sometimes described Brooke as philanthropically irresponsible. Andre Bishop, who you saw in the video and is a friend of ours and is the head of Lincoln Center, and along with Prep for Prep, the Child Mind Institute, and the Whitney Museum, these have been our principal philanthropies, and we feel fortunate to have been able to contribute to such organizations. And lastly, I return to my family. Brooke and I have been extraordinarily fortunate, and while I don't agree that Brooke is the only reason for my success, the last person who said that was Brooke's father. Clearly, without Brooke and my kids, without their support and understanding, I could have never pursued career goals with the focus that was so important. Thank you, and thank you to Spire.
Beautiful, beautiful. What a night. What a wonderful way to end the evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chad Hagel, the founding president of Spire. I had to exercise my last remaining bit of executive authority to get my way up here tonight to conclude the evening. It was very important to me to be able to do so. First of all, in order to thank our staff, Anthony, Sydney, and of course Elizabeth Youngblood, for everything that they did, not only to put on a wonderful event tonight, but to put on an absolutely fantastic SREC conference this week. They deserve a round of applause and recognition. And finally, it was important to me to sort of come full circle. When we, several years ago, had the opportunity to visit China on our first international excursion of the SREC, we were hosted very generously by two organizations, and both of those organizations are represented here tonight. Prologis, Hamid, thank you very much, and Heinz. Jim Bowie and his team were phenomenal hosts to us in China and allowed us to have an amazing experience there. And they actually made one key piece of the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame possible. And you see that key piece in this chair that's sitting beside me. We toured the Stanford Institute at Peking University, which is a center abroad, and the Alumni Association was gracious enough at Howard's request to allow us into that facility, meet the director, and have an incredible experience there. And there's a fine wood craftsman in China that made every piece of furniture in that facility with the beautiful ornate Stanford logo on it. And so from that year on, every year that we've had the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame, we have honored at each member of the Hall of Fame with a chair so that they have a chair at the table for the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame. And Dan was awarded his chair in New York when we had the event there. And it's my great pleasure tonight to award this chair to Jim Bowie, who has brought us around full circle to this moment and has now earned officially his seat at the Stanford Real Estate Hall of Fame table. So thank you very much, Jim, for making this possible. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for this wonderful occasion. Take care.